The day Emeka Okafor walked into the desert and did not come back, nobody cried. Not one person, not his mother's sister, not the village head, not even the children who used to throw stones at him. They just watched him go. And when the sand swallowed his figure, they turned around and went back to their lives. Because in Tudunwada, a small, forgotten village on the edge of Jigawa State, in the scorching heart of northern Nigeria, Emeka Okafor was nobody. He was the boy who didn't belong, the boy with no father, the boy with a secret so heavy it had bent his back by the time he was 14. But what nobody in Tudunwada knew, what nobody in this entire country knew, was that beneath that desert, beneath those cracked, dead, thirsty miles of sand, something was waiting for him, something that had been waiting for centuries. This is the story of the outcast who discovered a sunken city beneath the dry desert, and how one boy's shame became the world's greatest secret. Emeka Okafor was born on a Tuesday morning in the middle of a harmattan so brutal it cracked the walls of houses. His mother, Adai, was 23 years old. She was beautiful. She was alone, and she refused to tell anyone who the father was. In Tudunwada, that was not just a shame, that was a sentence. The village women stopped greeting her at the borehole. The men started whispering things she could not unhear. And when Emeka was old enough to walk to the market alone, the children made sure he understood what his mother's silence had cost him. They called him Dan Iska, child of the wind, a child with no roots, a child from nowhere. Emeka was quiet. He was always quiet. He had these eyes, large, dark, searching eyes, the kind of eyes that made older people uncomfortable, like he was looking for something in their faces, something they were hiding. His teacher in the one-room school, Malam Suleiman, once told Adai, "This your son, he thinks too much. That is dangerous for a poor child." And Adai had nodded. She had gone home. She had sat in the dark of their mud brick room, and she had cried so quietly that Emeka, sleeping beside her, never heard a sound. But he felt it. He always felt everything. By the time Emeka was 12, he had developed a strange habit. He walked to the edge of the desert. Every evening, when the sun turned the sky the color of burning iron, Emeka would leave the village, walk past the last baobab tree, past the rusted borehole nobody used anymore, past the crumbling wall where the boys played football, and he would sit at the edge of the sand. And he would listen. People thought he was mad. Old Mama Halima, who sold tuwo shinkafa by the roadside, once grabbed his arm as he passed. She said, "Emeka, what do you hear in that sand, eh? What does the desert tell you?" He looked at her, and he said, "It sounds like it's breathing." She released his arm. She made a sign with her fingers that was meant to ward off evil, and she never spoke to him again. But here is what nobody knew about Emeka. Here is the secret. His mother, Adai, the woman they had shamed and isolated for 12 years, was not who they thought she was. She had not always been poor. She had not always been nobody. Before Tudunwada, before the harmattan, before Emeka, Adai had been a graduate student at Bayero University in Kano. She had been studying archaeology, ancient civilizations, the lost cities of the Sahel, and she had fallen in love with her professor, a man named Dr. Chukwuemeka Osei, brilliant, older, married. When she told him she was pregnant, he had made her a promise. He said, "I will leave everything for you and this child." He lied. He transferred to a university in Abuja. He blocked her number. He pretended she had never existed. Adai had returned to her mother's village in Tudunwada in disgrace. She had buried her books, her notes, her entire past life in a metal box under the floor of their room, and she had never spoken of it any other time. But the blood does not forget, and Emeka, without ever opening a single one of those buried books, had inherited every single question her mother never answered. It happened when Emeka was 15. There had been a dust storm, 3 days of it, the kind that turns afternoon into midnight and fills your lungs with the taste of old earth. When it cleared, the landscape had shifted, the dunes had moved, the desert had rearranged itself the way it does sometimes, like a sleeping giant rolling over. Emeka walked out that evening as he always did, but this time something was different. There, at the place where he usually sat, the sand had blown away from a patch of ground to reveal something hard underneath, dark, smooth, flat. He knelt down. He brushed away more sand with his hands. It was stone, carved stone, and on the surface of the stone, lines, marks, symbols, not random, deliberate, a pattern that repeated, and inside the pattern, unmistakably, a map. Emeka sat there until it was dark, until the stars came out above the Sahel sky, thick and ancient and indifferent. He sat there and he traced those lines with his fingers, again and again and again. He did not understand what it was, but his hands were shaking, not from fear, from recognition. Like some part of him, some deep, inherited cellular part of him knew exactly what he was touching. He did not tell anyone. He was 15, he was an outcast, he had no phone, no internet, no adult in his life who would immediately take this discovery away from him or tell him he was imagining things. So he did what he had always done. He kept it inside, and he went back every day. Every day he brushed away more sand. The stone slab grew larger. The map grew more detailed. After 3 weeks, he had uncovered a surface the size of a door. After 6 weeks, 2 doors. After 2 months, something that looked less like a slab and more like a roof. He stood on top of it one evening and he felt it, a hollow sound beneath his feet. His heart nearly stopped. There was something under there, something large, something deep, something that had been buried so long the desert had grown over it like skin over a wound. There was one person Emeka almost told. Her name was Fatima Bello. She was 17 years old, 2 years older than him, the daughter of the village's only retired school teacher. She was the only person in Tudunwada who had ever spoken to Emeka like he was a full human being. She would stop at the well and say, "Emeka, you look like you haven't eaten. Here." She would leave pieces of fried yam on the windowsill of Emeka's mother's house. She thought nobody knew it was her. Everyone knew. Fatima had a laugh that made the whole street feel warmer, and she had long since decided that the village's cruelty towards Emeka and his mother was a sin she would not participate in. One afternoon, she found him at the edge of the desert, his hands and arms covered in sand up to the elbow, his face wide, his eyes wide with something she had never seen on him before. "Emeka, what is wrong with you?" He looked at her for a long moment, and then he said, "Fatima, what if everything they ever said about me was actually about something they didn't understand?" She stared at him. "What are you talking about?" He almost told her. He opened his mouth, and then old Mama Halima walked past with her tray of food and threw them both a look that could curdle milk. Emeka closed his mouth. "Nothing," he said, "nothing." But Fatima had seen his hands. She had seen the sand. She had seen the look in his eyes, and she had started to pay attention. 3 months after he found the stone, on a moonless Friday night in the dry season, Emeka made a decision. He packed a small bag, a torch with dying batteries that he had found thrown behind the school, a bottle of water, 3 pieces of leftover bread, a piece of chalk. He told his mother he was going to sleep early. Adai looked at him the way she sometimes did, that look that said, "I know you are lying, but I am too tired to fight." She touched his cheek. She said, "Emeka, whatever you are carrying, know that you are not alone." He did not answer. He could not answer, because if he opened his mouth, he would tell her everything, and he was not ready. He left the house at midnight. The walk to the edge of the desert took 12 minutes. He had counted. Every stone, every crack in the earth, every sleeping sound of a village that had never once tried to know him. When he reached the site, he fell to his knees and began to dig. Not at the surface this time, at the edge. He had spent weeks studying the map. He had drawn it over and over in the dust of the school compound during lunch when the other children were far away. He had rotated it in his mind until he saw what it was pointing to. Not the center of the slab, the corner. There was an entry point. There had always been an entry point. He had just been looking in the wrong place. His hands hit something hard after 20 minutes of digging. Wood. Old wood. Ancient, dark, dense. And in the wood, a groove. A handle. He gripped it. He pulled. The earth resisted. Then, with a sound like a gasp, like the desert itself exhaling, a door opened. Cold air hit his face. Not the heat of buried rock. Cold. The kind of cold that has been sealed away for a very long time. Emeka shone his torch into the darkness below. Stone steps, carved perfectly, leading down. And on the walls of the staircase, paintings, colors so vivid, so alive, that for a moment he thought he was hallucinating. Blue, gold, deep red. Images of people, tall, proud, elaborately dressed people walking through a city. A city with towers, with markets, with waterways. A city that had once been full of life. A city that now existed only underground, preserved beneath the desert like a secret too precious to die. Emeka sat at the top of those stairs for 4 full minutes. He could not move. His torch flickered. His breath was coming in short, sharp bursts. And then, because he was Emeka Okofo, the boy who had spent his entire life being told he was nothing, the boy whose blood remembered things his mind had never been taught, he went down. What Emeka found beneath that desert. I need you to stop for a moment. I need you to breathe, because what I am about to tell you is going to change the way you see Nigeria. It was a city. A real city, not ruins, not rubble, a preserved city. Buildings carved entirely from a dark reddish stone that Emeka had never seen before. Streets, actual streets, laid with flat tiles in patterns so precise a ruler could not improve them. Archways, courtyards, a central square that was larger than anything in Tudunwada. And in the center of the square, a well. Not a dry well, a well with water in it, clean, still, cold water that reflected Emeka's torchlight like a mirror. He knelt beside it and he cried. He did not know why he was crying. He just cried, the way a person cries when something long broken inside them is suddenly, unexpectedly, gently put back together. He explored for 2 hours. Every room he entered told him more. In one building, shelves, actual shelves carved into the wall, still held objects. Clay pots sealed with wax, metal instruments whose purpose he could not guess. Tablets, hundreds of tablets, covered in a script he could not read. In another building, what looked like a library. Wooden frames that had once held scrolls or bound pages. Most of the material had decayed, but some had not. Some of the tablets were perfect, untouched by time, like they were waiting. And in the largest building of all, the one at the far end of the main street, a throne room, a raised platform, a seat carved from a single piece of stone, and above the seat, carved into the wall in letters so large Emeka could make them out even with his dying torch, words, not in any language he knew, but beneath those words, because whoever built this city had thought ahead, had planned for this moment, beneath those words in a script he recognized, Hausa, old Hausa, old enough that the spelling was strange, the characters unfamiliar. Emeka sounded the words out, slowly, syllable by syllable, and when he understood what they said, he had to sit down on the floor of a throne room that was older than his country. Because the words said, "What the sand hides, the worthy will find. What the world discards, the desert keeps safe." The king of this city was never a king by blood, he was a king by burden. If you are reading this, the burden has found its heir. Emeka Okofo, 15 years old, no father, no name, no future, sat in the throne room of a civilization the world had forgotten. And for the first time in his life, he did not feel like nothing. He came back the next night, and the night after that. He was more careful now. He covered the entrance with brush and loose sand during the day. He made sure no footprints pointed towards it. He went alone, always alone, in the deep middle of the night. But the third night, Fatima was there, standing at the edge of the desert, wrapped in a shawl against the cold, her arms crossed, waiting. Emeka stopped walking. "How long have you been here?" he asked. "Long enough," she said. "Long enough to follow you twice already without you noticing." He stared at her. She stared at him. "Show me," she said. He showed her. He watched her face as she went down those stone steps. He watched her when she saw the city. Fatima was not a quiet person. Fatima had a voice that could be heard 3 compounds away. But in that city, she was completely, utterly silent. She walked through every building. She touched every carved wall. She bent over the tablets and ran her fingers across the script. When she came back to where Emeka was standing, her face was wet. "Emeka," she whispered, "do you know what this is?" "Yes," he said. "No," she said, "I don't think you do, not fully. My father has books, old books, history books that are not on any school curriculum in this country." She paused. "I think this is Durbi, the lost capital city, the one they say is just a myth." Emeka felt the hair on his arms rise. Durbi. Even in Tudunwada, that name existed, but only in the mouths of very old people, only in the stories told at night when the children were supposed to be asleep. A city of scholars, of healers, of leaders who had no royal blood but were chosen by the land itself. A city that had, according to legend, disappeared into the earth 1200 years ago. Not conquered, not burned, not abandoned, disappeared. As if it had chosen to hide, as if it had been saving itself for something. That night, lying on the cold floor of the ancient throne room, staring up at a carved ceiling that someone had painted with stars 1200 years ago, Emeka asked the question he had always been afraid to ask. "Fatima, why do you think the map was only visible after the storm, after all these centuries?" Fatima was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My father once told me that the desert has a memory, that it keeps things until the right person comes." "The right person," Emeka repeated. "Or the right time," she said. The silence between them was full. "I want to tell my mother," Emeka said finally. Fatima looked at him. "Why her first? Not an expert? A university? The government?" Emeka was quiet. Then he said, "Because she buried something to survive this village. She gave up everything she was, and she raised me in a place that hated both us. She deserves to know that the thing she passed on to me was not nothing." Fatima could not speak for a moment. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay, we tell your mother first." Adai was awake when Emeka came home. She was always awake when Emeka came home. She was sitting at the table in the dark, her hands folded in her lap, her face doing that thing it always did, that careful practiced blankness that was meant to look like peace, but was actually the face of a woman holding herself together with nothing but stubbornness and love. Emeka sat across her. He took her hands. She looked down at his hands, the sand, the dirt, and something moved in her face. "Where have you been?" He said, "Mama, I need to ask you something first before I tell you anything." She was still. "What did you study at Beirut University?" The silence that followed that question was the loudest thing Emeka had ever heard. Adeze's hands tensed under his. Her face, that careful, practiced face, cracked just slightly. "Who told you?" she whispered. "Nobody," he said. "I found the box under the floor 3 years ago. I never opened it. I just knew it was there." Adeze closed her eyes. A tear ran down her face, then another. When she opened her eyes, something in them had changed. Something she had locked away for 15 years was coming back to the surface. "Archaeology," she whispered. "Ancient civilizations of the Sahel." Emeka squeezed her hands. "Mama," he said, "come with me." The sound Adeze made when she stepped into that city, I cannot describe it to you. I can try. It was the sound a person makes when they realize that the most painful chapter of their life was not a punishment, it was a preparation. She walked through those streets, this woman who had buried her education, her ambition, her identity under a mud floor in a village that had never deserved her, and she understood everything her son had only guessed at. She read the tablets, she read the inscriptions on the walls, she moved through that library with the hands of someone coming home. At 2 in the morning, in a throne room 12 centuries old, Adeze Okofor sat on the stone floor and held her son's face in her hands. And she said, "Your father was not a good man, but he was right about one thing. He always said the desert would give up its greatest secret someday." She looked at Emeka. "Emeka, this city, what I am reading on these walls, this is not just history, this is proof that there was a civilization here that predates everything they have ever taught us in school. This rewrites everything." She pulled him close. "And you found it." "We found it," he said. "No," she whispered into his ear. "No, my son, this was always yours. The desert kept it for you." They had 1 week of peace. 1 week of going down into the city at night, cataloging, photographing on Fatima's old phone, filling notebooks with translations and observations. 1 week of being 3 people, a boy, a girl, and a woman who carried the greatest secret in Nigerian history inside them. Then, Usman Danladi saw them. Usman was 22. He was the village head's son. He was the kind of young man who had nothing to do and everything to say. He had been awake late following a girl he was interested in and had instead followed Emeka, Adaize, and Fatima into the desert. He didn't go down, he wasn't brave enough for that, but he saw the door. He saw the light coming up from underground. He saw them emerge, and by morning, the entire village knew. What happened next was not surprising, it was just heartbreaking. People who had not spoken to Adaize in 15 years were now at her door. The village head, Alhaji Musa, arrived with 3 men. He was not there to congratulate them, he was there to claim. "Whatever is under that sand," he said, his voice smooth and dangerous, "is on village land. It belongs to the community." Adaize stepped outside to face him. She was no longer the woman who sat in the dark with folded hands. Something had reawakened in her. 15 years of buried education, 15 years of swallowed pride, 15 years of surviving a village that had tried to make her invisible. She looked at Alhaji Musa and she said, "With respect, Alhaji, what you are describing is exactly how every significant discovery in this country gets taken from the people who make it. This discovery belongs to the nation, not to this village and not to you." Alhaji Musa smiled, but his eyes did not smile. "You are a woman without a husband speaking to me about what belongs where. I am a woman with a degree, and I know the National Commission for Museums and Monuments Act. I know what it says, and I know how to make a phone call." She turned around and went back inside, and Emeka, watching from the window, felt something shift in his chest, like a bond that had been broken for 15 years, finally setting itself right. Adaize made the phone call, not to the local government, not to any politician who would bury the story along with the city. She called Professor Ngozi Adeyemi, the only woman in Nigerian academia she had kept contact with, her former classmate at Bayero, now a senior archaeologist at the University of Lagos. She called her at 4 in the morning. Professor Adeyemi picked up on the second ring. Adaize said 3 sentences. Ngozi, it's Adaize. I found Dobby. The silence on the phone lasted 8 full seconds. Then Ngozi said, I am on the first flight to Kano. The team arrived 4 days later. 6 archaeologists, 3 historians, 2 documentary filmmakers, and 1 journalist from a major international outlet who had been tipped off by someone at the university. The village of Tudowada, which had never once made the news, was suddenly on every news ticker in the country. Satellite trucks parked on the dirt road, generators hummed where there had only ever been silence. People who had never in their lives left Jigawa State were now being interviewed by cameras, and at the center of it all, Emeka Okafor, 15 years old, the boy nobody cried for, the boy they called Daniska, child of the wind, standing at the entrance to a city 1,200 years old, explaining in careful detail to a woman with a microphone how he had listened to the desert for 3 years, how he had trusted what he heard, how he had gone down anyway. The archaeologists confirmed everything within 72 hours. The city was real. It was vast. It was, as far as they could determine, the most significant pre-colonial urban discovery in West African history. The tablets were real. The writing was real. The dynasty that had built this city, the dynasty of scholar kings chosen by consensus, not blood, was real. And one other thing was real. One thing that Professor Adeyemi pulled Adaize aside to discuss privately before she told anyone else. She had translated an inscription on the door of the throne room, an inscription that had been there all along, but that Emeka, not knowing what to look for, had missed. It was a genealogy, the lineage of the last king of Dobby, a man who 1,200 years ago made a choice. He sealed his city rather than surrender it to invaders. He sent his family north into the scrubland, into the communities that would become the villages of Jigawa. He gave his descendants one instruction: stay close to the sand. The city will call one of you home. The archaeologists showed Adaize the name at the bottom of the genealogy, the last name in the line, the name that had been carried, corrupted, shortened, and changed over 12 centuries of migration and survival. Adaize read it. She read it again. She sat down on the ground because the name at the bottom of that 1,200-year-old list was Okafor, her son's name, her name, their name. Adaize went back to the village that evening. She did not run. She walked slowly. She walked the way a woman walks when she is no longer afraid. The village head's house was lit up. There was a meeting going on. The men were deciding how to position themselves for the money they assumed was coming. Adaize walked past all of it. She went to the old community notice board, the board where someone in 15 years had written her name in shame. She posted one piece of paper, a photograph of the inscription, a photograph of the genealogy, a photograph of the name at the bottom, and then she went home. By morning, Tudunwada understood what had happened. The boy they had called Daniska, the child of the wind, was not a child of nothing. He was a child of everything. He was the last verified descendant of the scholar king who built the city they had been living next to their entire lives without knowing. The desert had not swallowed Emeka. It had been waiting for him. Old Mama Halima came to Adaize's door. She stood outside for a long time. When Adaize opened the door, Mama Halima did not speak. She knelt in the dust, an old woman kneeling. Adaize looked at her for a long moment. Then she reached down and took the woman's hand, and she raised her up, because she was not the kind of woman who needed people on their knees. She was the kind of woman who deserved to look people in the eye. 6 months after Emeka Okafor walked into the desert and they did not cry, he came back. He came back with cameras, with scholars, with a mother who stood straight for the 15 years, with a friend named Fatima who always knew he was more than they said. He came back with the world behind him. The site was designated a UNESCO Heritage Candidate. The Nigerian government, after some pressure, some negotiation, and some very public letters from Professor Adai, established a trust, a foundation named for the lost dynasty, named at Emeka's insistence, not on him, for his mother, the Adai Foundation for Ancient African Heritage. Adai, who had buried her degree under a mud floor, was appointed as the lead cultural custodian of the excavation site. Fatima Bello received a scholarship to study history at the University of Lagos. Emeka himself, at the ceremony marking the site's official recognition, was asked to speak. He was 16 by then. He was tall. He was quiet the way he had always been. But the quietness had changed. It was no longer the quietness of a person trying to take up less space. It was the quietness of a person who had learned that silence can hold entire cities. He stood at the microphone. He looked at the crowd. He saw the journalists, the archaeologists, the government officials, the international cameras, and at the very back of the crowd, the people of Tudunwada, standing, watching, some of them ashamed, some of them proud, most of them somewhere in between. He looked at them for a long moment. Then he said, "My name is Emeka Okafor. I come from Tudunwada, Jigawa State. I was the boy nobody cried for. I was the child of the wind. I was nobody." He paused. But the desert knew my name. And when nobody else was watching, when nobody else believed, when the whole world had decided what I was worth, the earth opened up and showed me what I was made of. I want to say something to every child in Nigeria who has been told they are nothing, who has been called a name that was meant to make them small, who has been pushed to the edge of the village, the edge of the classroom, the edge of the family, the edge of everything. His voice broke. He let it break. He did not hide it. The edge is not the end. The edge is where the desert begins, and the desert. He looked up. His mother was in the front row. Her hand was over her mouth. Her eyes were shining. The desert keeps the best things. They say in Tudunwada now, when the harmattan comes, when the sand moves, when the desert breathes that long, slow, deep breath, the old people stop and they listen, because they know now that the desert is not empty, because they know now that nothing is ever truly discarded, nothing that is worthy. The things the world throws away, the children it refuses to see, the women it tries to make invisible, the names it buries under its own shame, the desert keeps them, patient, preserved, waiting, until the right wind comes, until the storm clears, until the sand shifts and the air comes home. Emeka Okafor walked into the desert, and they did not cry, but the city did. It had been waiting 1,200 years for someone worthy to open its doors. It wept with joy.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe by clicking this button. And don't forget to like and share.